Antibiotic resistance is a situation when microorganisms that cause disease, these are the ones we worry about, have acquired traits that make them harder to kill with our current arsenal of drugs. That's something that happened right at the very beginning of the antibiotic era. It was noticed, you know, even before, for example, penicillin made it to the market. Antibiotic resistance, or resistance in particular to penicillin, was noted in the clinic, and so it's something that's intimately linked to the antibiotic use, and so we have to be very careful about managing this. As a result of our use of these drugs over the last 50, 60 years, this resistance to all classes of antibiotics has spread throughout the globe. And it really is linked very much to how we use drugs, how they are disposed of, clinical practices, veterinary practices, agricultural practices, how available these drugs are all throughout the world. And so the reason why we have to be careful of this is, first of all, there's not an infinite supply of these things, right? So they are almost the equivalent of non-renewable natural resources because of the spread of resistance, and we're so intimately linked with the globe now, right? So resistance that appears in one part of the world can move to another part of the world in less than 24 hours through the advent of modern transportation. So it's a global issue. It's an important clinical issue. It's an important agricultural issue, and it threatens our ability to control disease. Imagine what the world would be without antibiotics. So first of all, things that diseases that we think of as being easily dealt with. You get a scratch, it gets infected. You don't ever think about losing your arm or losing your life. Your kid gets an earache or a strep throat. Any of these things that we just routinely dispatch now. You get some ailment, it goes away, and because of these wonderful drugs. The other thing that, of course, antibiotics do is they enable modern medicine, like surgery. Imagine having surgery without the ability to control infection. Imagine chemotherapy without that reduces your ability to fight off infections. Drops your immune response dramatically. Imagine having chemotherapy without that. Imagine organ transplants. You can't do it without suppressing the immune system, and as a result, become more susceptible to infection. I mean, all of modern medicine is wrapped around our remarkable ability to control infection. So without these drugs, we are back to what it was like, so literally at the turn of the previous century, where it was not uncommon for children not to make it through their first 5 years because of infectious disease, where the spread of diseases like cholera, like the plague, were not uncommon as epidemics. These are things that we control now without any difficulty, except in serious circumstances where we see natural disasters occur. And then when we lose our ability to control those things, you can see how very quickly we do return to those times. So it's incredibly important that we are very careful with all of it. At the personal level, the things that people need to know is that these are finite resources. That there's not a bunch of antibiotics out there that will serve us for until we go off into the sunset. There's a limited number of compounds here, and they're all under threat. And so we need to be very careful about how we use these things. And we also need to be very careful not to press, the healthcare profession to be doling them out willy-nilly. So it's important that individuals take responsibility for that. The other thing that needs to come out of this is that there needs to be an awareness by the healthcare sector as a whole that this is a very significant issue that requires intervention in new research, to identify new drugs, to identify new targets for drugs, to understand why drug resistance occurs, and if there's ways that we can control it. It requires surveillance. We need to be acutely aware of where these organisms are and where they come from. These things are all happening around the world, but they're not well coordinated. We need to be very careful about how we use antibiotics in agriculture. This is something that in North America has not been well regulated compared to what it's like around the rest of the world, at least in places like Europe. And this discussion needs to happen. We need to be talking about this, and this is an opportunity to raise awareness for all of these things. For the most part, people don't think about antibiotics or infectious disease because it doesn't really affect them until it actually hits them really, really closely in their life in some way. Yet these evolutionary pressures that are forcing the drug resistance problem don't go away. They are continuing to be a significant issue, and so they may not be the headline grabbing, attention setting story of the day on a regular basis, but it continues to be a problem. It's this chronic issue, and it's getting worse. Complicated by the fact that most of the pharmaceutical industry is indicating that they can't make enough money, or they can't find some suitable solutions in this area. So there's, at the same time, the drug resistance is creating this problem where we're losing our ability to control lots of diseases. There's no new supply of new drugs, or that supply is really dwindling. It's really limited to only a few companies these days. So that's a very complicated thing, and this is something the public needs to be aware of, because they need to know that maybe not today, but in a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 5 years from now, when they go to need an antibiotic, or a loved one is in a hospital and gets a drug-resistant organism, that there may not be something on the shelf for them to take. And so these kinds of days, like the World Health Day, really give us an opportunity to let the public know that this is a significant issue. There's an election happening. It'd be nice for the politicians to address it as well. That this is a significant health problem that is going to affect not just Canadians, but the whole globe, and we should be engaged in it. So specifically in my group, we're very interested in antibiotics and the resistance mechanisms, and so we're interested in understanding how antibiotic resistance occurs, how it's spread throughout the world, what the specific mechanisms are at the level of the proteins and genes that are involved in this, and to use that information to overcome resistance, either to raise awareness that resistance is a significant issue and it's not just here, it's everywhere, or to develop drug strategies to overcome resistance. The Michael DeGroot Institute for Infectious Disease Research contains not only this kind of work that's happening in my lab, but a whole number of colleagues who are working very much in the field of trying to prevent and control infectious diseases. We have facilities here that are very, very well suited to early stage drug discovery. We have a high throughput screening lab to now enable us to look for new drugs, for example. We have colleagues who are looking to natural sources for new drugs. We have colleagues who are making new molecules. We have folks identifying new targets to treat disease. We have folks that are looking at the spread of disease in populations and modeling those populations. So the Institute is really quite remarkable in that way. It spans 3 faculties and 8 departments, has 38 faculty members and well over 400 trainees. It's really a sort of tremendous little think tank for addressing the issues that the WHO is rightly highlighting in the World Health Day on April 7th.